Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries.
The ocean is an archive of things we were never meant to remember, but occasionally it spits a piece of our history back out. According to maritime legend, in 1880, a ship called the James B. Chester was found drifting silently in the mid-Atlantic. When a passing crew climbed over the wooden bulwarks to investigate, the silence was absolute. Below deck, chairs were kicked back in haste, as if the occupants had jumped up in sheer terror. But up top, the wooden planks were slick with dark, coagulated blood. And then there was the captain's table. Sitting neatly in the center was a plate of meat and potatoes, still steaming hot. Whoever had been on board hadn't been dead for days. They had vanished into thin air mere seconds before the rescue party arrived. It is the perfect maritime nightmare. This contrast, the eerie domesticity of a hot meal against the sudden, violent reality of a bloody deck, satisfies our deepest cultural fears about supernatural abduction at sea. It's a story engineered to curdle the blood of even the most seasoned sailors. The physical setting of this campfire story only amplifies the terror. The legend places the Chester deep inside the Sargasso Sea. This is a massive, clockwise rotating ocean gyre in the North Atlantic, and the only named sea on Earth without land boundaries. Bounded entirely by ocean currents, the Sargasso is defined by its strange, windless calms and vast mats of free-floating sargassum seaweed kept afloat by thousands of small air bladders. Early mariners like Christopher Columbus feared this region, suspecting the dense, tangled weed would trap their wooden hulls forever. But maritime records from the 19th century tell a different story. The James B. Chester was not found in 1880. More importantly, she was discovered hundreds of miles to the north, nowhere near the stagnant, weed-choked waters of the Sargasso Sea. This discrepancy between the legend and the logs forces a return to the evidence. To understand the crew's fate, we have to forensically examine the conditions of the actual 1855 encounter. The true incident occurred in February 1855, in the freezing shipping lanes of the North Atlantic, a region defined by violent winter storms and massive swells. The British vessel Marathon battled these gales when her lookout spotted a speck on the horizon. It was the James Chester, drifting recklessly across the wind with her sails torn to shreds. The captain of the Marathon sent his men out in a rowboat to board her. Because they were hoping to claim a financial reward in maritime court, these sailors kept meticulous, legally binding logs of what they found. Their reports contain no mention of blood. Instead, they found a chaotic mess of tangled rigging and deck gear, displaced by heavy seawater continuously washing over the hull. The boarding party also reached the ship's galley, but they didn't find a steaming meal. They found a cabin in total disarray. The food scattered on the table was cold, stale hardtack and soaked provisions, ruined by moisture and the violent pitching of the storm. These physical conditions, the lack of blood, and the clear storm damage, point to a frantic, uncoordinated human exit rather than a supernatural event. The most critical pieces of evidence were missing entirely. The davits, the small cranes used to hold lifeboats, were swung out over the water, empty. Below deck, the crew's personal sea chests were stripped of their clothing and valuables, and the official logbook was gone. This suggests a fatal moment of 19th century sea panic. Imagine being exhausted after days of brutal gales, operating the manual pumps in total darkness while the bilge water rises. In that state, a captain can easily miscalculate his ship's structural integrity and make a terrifying, incorrect assessment. The hull is sinking. The crew chose to abandon their massive wooden bark for tiny, fragile lifeboats in the middle of a winter gale. It was a choice that likely resulted in their deaths from freezing or drowning within hours. Meanwhile, the James Chester remained stable. When the Marathon found her, the captain realized she was still seaworthy. Under 19th century salvage law, finding a derelict ship allowed a crew to claim a massive financial reward, granted as a percentage of the ship and her cargo. A skeleton crew spent weeks navigating the leaking vessel into port, proving she was durable enough to survive. The James Chester remained afloat for weeks, a silent record of a fatal miscalculation made in the dark. Since the historical reality is a standard, tragic storm abandonment in 1855, we must account for the later editions of bloody decks and hot food. The origin of these details is historical plagiarism. 17 years after the James Chester incident, the discovery of the Mary Celeste became a global sensation. Decades later, pulp writers stole the warm meal trope from the Mary Celeste, applying it to the James Chester. To increase shock value, they relocated the ship to the Sargasso Sea and invented bloody decks to sell magazines. We buy into these fabrications because a supernatural curse is often easier to process than the bleak, random indifference of nature. A ghost story turns a cold tragedy into a campfire mystery. The historical record of the James B. Chester has been erased, leaving the actual fate of those terrified sailors buried beneath layers of manufactured mystery.